Okay, we are online. We are about to start. We should be starting at 9:15. One minute to go. Okay, it's 9:15. Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sebastiano Toffaletti, the European Digital SME Alliance. Happy to have you all here for the 2020 ICT Forum of SBS. The topic of this year event is artificial intelligence, norms and policy and standardization for artificial intelligence, challenges and what are the challenges and opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. Without further indulgence, we will follow our agenda, and I would like to give the floor to Miapetra, who's the Director of SBS, Small Business Standards. Good morning, Miapetra.
Good morning, Sebastiano, and good morning to all of you. It is really a pleasure for me as Director of Small Business Standards to open this ICT Forum today. I just wanted to say a few words first about SBS, Small Business Standards, for those that might not know us yet. So SBS is the European Association representing SMEs in standardization. And every year we organize the SBS Forum on ICT Standards. The aim of this forum is basically to offer a platform for discussion and for the sharing of information about ongoing ICT standardization activities that are relevant to SMEs, and to bring basically the perspective of SMEs into the ICT standardization debate. As Sebastiano said, this year's edition is dedicated to artificial intelligence. And we all know that the adoption of AI is at different stages in different sectors, but we also see that there are more and more sectors that are also embracing and starting to use this kind of technologies. The benefits are many. These go from process optimization to reducing the need, for example, for humans to be working in dangerous environments, predictive maintenance, improved medical diagnosis, or the development of personalized goods and services. And we all know the potential for businesses and for the economy is big. And we also know that this is also an important technology that can help us to address some of the current societal challenges, such as climate change or the aging population. So the potential benefits of artificial intelligence is something that should encourage, I think, business leaders and also policymakers to embrace and adopt AI. But we also know that there are many challenges, and it is the case for other emerging technologies. And artificial intelligence, of course, is not an exception. The potential challenges include impact on the workforce and other societal concerns, such as misuse or algorithmic bias. These challenges cannot be ignored. And we also know data privacy and data access are also critical issues to address AI in order to, that need to be addressed, in order to realize really the potential of this technology. If we look at SMEs, we also know that SMEs struggle more than large companies to keep up with the pace of digital transformation and finding the right technical skills to profit from these technologies. And access to data is also an important challenge for SMEs, which is essential for the further development of AI. Let me here do a little short parenthesis to mention the SBS annual event that will take place tomorrow afternoon. As I mentioned, access to data is also a key issue for SMEs and for profiting from AI. And this is precisely one of the main topics that we will be discussing tomorrow. Tomorrow's event is also an online event, so don't hesitate to join us. But coming back to today's conference, I think another important issue we will discuss is the role of Europe and how Europe can become a global leader in AI. In order to do this, we need to ensure the challenges I mentioned are tackled. And we also need to make sure that we strengthen our digital frontrunners, which are many of them are SMEs and startups, by creating the right environment for AI to develop. I think in this context, and today we will be discussing these issues, the important point, the important aspect is to strike a balance between regulations, standards, and innovation, especially when we know countries around the globe are also heavily investing in the race to lead these technologies. Today's event offers a valuable opportunity to discuss these aspects. As I said, we have brought together highly qualified and knowledgeable speakers and panelists. We have some innovative SMEs that will be participating in the panels. We also have a keynote speaker, Mrs. Sioli, and also the participation of a member of the European Parliament, Mrs. Kumpula-Natri, in addition to representatives from CEN-CENELEC and ETSI. And we are also very happy to count with the presence of Mr. Karakalios, who is the Managing Director of IEEE Standard Association. So I just want to thank you, all of you again, for joining us today. And I think without any further ado, I will give the floor to Sebastiano, and hoping that we will have, and I'm sure we will have, very interesting discussions today.
Thank you very much, Maitane, for this welcome, warm welcome. And I would say that we should be going directly to the keynote, the remarks that we have asked the European Commission to provide us with today. And I'm happy to have Lucy Sioli, who is working as a director for digital industry in the European Commission, DG Connect. Most of you probably know her already. She is indeed someone who has been extremely active in anything that has to do with digital, I would say, from skills to artificial intelligence to much more. And she is absolutely someone who is central in now the decisions of the Commission on this important topic. So Lucy, I understand you are connected as well, and perhaps you can already switch on your camera and audio. Hello.
Hi. Hello.
Good morning, Lucy.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to this important event. I do think small medium enterprises, as we all know, do play a very important role in our European economy, and then now at the time of recovery, it's more important than ever. So I'm very happy to be here, and I was invited to summarize or remind the content of the white paper on AI, and also to give you some information on the public consultation that we carried out until June. I have a presentation I will try now to share with you.
Please do.
Okay. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Tell me when.
Yes.
I have to share your screen, just a moment.
Okay, now we can see it. It's on the screen.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will summarize what is European strategy in AI, and I will also try highlight some aspects that, in my opinion, are important for small, medium enterprises.
Thank you.
Let me first remind that we consider artificial intelligence very important for our economies and our welfare. We have seen that artificial intelligence, even during the period of COVID, has had a number of applications in terms of, for example, being used for reading scans of COVID patients, or being used to find the molecules for the drugs, or being used for the vaccine. It has had a variety of applications, and this is probably the most peculiar aspect of AI, and that's what it makes it so important for our life, is that it really applies to all the different sectors of the economy and of our life, from financial to agriculture, to energy, to manufacturing. So it has a very wide span of application. Having said that, the artificial intelligence systems may raise some concerns, and this is the reason why we have been talking about it so much. And the main concerns are raised in terms of our ability to protect the rights that we have acquired over time. I'm speaking in particular of the fundamental rights, but also of the rights that we have acquired in terms of safety. The question is whether the use of artificial intelligence, which is a technology that at times is opaque and complex, is actually able to respect the rights we have acquired, or whether we need further mechanisms in our legislation to ensure that these objectives are met. In the approach to AI, the European Commission has published actually a number of documents since 2018, but I would say most recently, this is just a reminder, this was just before the COVID started, we published a European strategy for data. This is very important because, of course, AI is based on the use of data. And one of the main barriers we have as European companies and European developers is the access to data, especially compared to companies in other parts of the world. So this is also an important element of an artificial intelligence strategy. And at the same time, we have published a white paper on artificial intelligence where we have distinguished actions in favor of promoting investment in artificial intelligence, and on the other hand, actions about developing an ecosystem of trust, because we believe that the two go hand in hand, in the sense that you can become, as a continent, a leading developer of artificial intelligence if you're sure you can make your businesses and citizens use the technology by creating trust around this technology. In the ecosystem of excellence, I will go quickly through these measures, but they're important. I think they're important to keep in mind in the whole discussion on trust as well. How does Europe position itself in the landscape of artificial intelligence? We're pretty strong in research, and we should continue to be. And so through the research program, we invest quite a lot of resources in research and artificial intelligence, and we have set up networks of excellence research centers. Now we are setting up a public-private partnership in research in AI, because we think that we need to be able to push research to industrial objectives. And this is a new public-private partnership that is being set up as we speak. We intend to accelerate the time of bringing innovation to the market by setting up, through the Digital Euro program, testing and experimentation facilities, so that companies and small medium enterprises in particular can go and test their innovation in similar to real environments. We want to help small medium enterprises through the digital innovation hubs. You all know these organizations very well, that they help SMEs to uptake digital, but we want to create special ones for artificial intelligence. And we want to promote the use of AI in the public sector, so that also procurement becomes a very important instrument for innovation. And finally, we want to promote the skills. I mean, an ecosystem of trust also goes through our ability to have the right skills to understand the technology, both at very deep levels, if we are developers, but also at more superficial levels if we are mere users. As I said, the ecosystem of excellence needs to go hand in hand with the ecosystem of trust, because artificial intelligence is a technology with certain characteristics that make it difficult for humans to understand how steps and decisions are taken by the artificial intelligence system. There is a certain level of opacity and complexity that makes it a risk to be using artificial intelligence for certain objectives without knowing exactly how the decisions are taken. And this is why in the ecosystem of trust, in the proposal that we have in mind for the regulatory framework, we have a risk-based approach very much in mind, meaning that we are interested in making sure that we can improve our understanding of those systems which can have a significant impact on our lives. We call them high risk. So we're not intending to propose legislation that address all possible artificial intelligence systems, but only those that really may have a significant impacts in terms of high risk. And for this, we would like to introduce some obligatory requirements. These requirements concern the quality of the training and of the testing data sets, the ability of developers and users to record the data sets they have used and the algorithms or the input to those algorithms they have used, that information is provided to the user when the user is using an artificial intelligence system, that the systems are robust and accurate, and that there is a certain degree of human oversight. Now, the idea that we have is that for very high risk system, maybe it could be useful to have ex-ante conformity assessment, meaning that before they are put on the market, there is a check on these requirements made by, in case of very high risk, by a third party, but it could also be made through self-certification. For lower risk, we have also proposed the idea of using a voluntary labeling system, meaning that companies could indicate through a label that they're actually respecting those requirements I have just mentioned, and this could help them in having a better reputation on the market. Now, this was in a nutshell, in a very short way. I summarized the proposal that we made. This proposal was in public consultation. We have received a number of replies, 1,215. It's high for a number of replies in a public consultation. It's obviously not representative in terms of actors in the European Union. But still, as you can see also from this slide, there was a certain balance between citizens and business and civil society and academia that actually replied to the consultation. And what we have received in general is that most respondents would find that the current legislation have gaps and need a new legislation. And most respondents agree that we should focus on high-risk applications. Then on the methodology for defining that high risk, there was much more fragmentation in terms of agreement and support, but I think that the vast majority did agree to the high-risk approach. And the main concerns that the respondents had were about the possibility for AI to breach fundamental rights, and in particular, when that AI brings about discriminatory outcomes. Now, the small medium enterprises in particular, we had, I'm not 100% sure this count is correct, but I think we had about 41.5% of the companies responding to small medium enterprises. The reason why I'm saying this number may not be completely correct is because it's very difficult. We received replies from industry associations, and it's very difficult for us to say whether they are large or small. And then we received replies also from companies from outside Europe, and sometimes it's difficult to tell which size they have as well. So this is an estimate I'm giving you. But just to say that probably around even half of the respondents of companies, which do not include the industry associations, may be from small medium enterprises. What we have, we have tried to filter the replies that we had from the questions to the small medium enterprises. We found, of course, out of the ecosystem of excellence, great support to the setup of digital innovation hubs, where we would like to have at least one hub on AI in every country. The biggest concern for the SMEs was about breaching the fundamental rights. And the majority of them is very much wishing to focus on high risk only. The most important requirement turns out to be robustness and accuracy. And they are very supportive of a voluntary labeling system. Now, I have to say that these replies, these last 4 replies, are not very different from the general replies from industry, but they're a bit more accentuated than the replies of the rest of the industry. This is what I can share with you with the small medium enterprises. I just want to highlight as a last remark the fact that we have very much in mind the issue that we want to find a balance between legislation and innovation. So this is one of the reasons why we want to be able to only focus on the high risk. And that we will be putting in place, if we go ahead with the legislation, we will also be putting in place mechanisms to support small, medium enterprises and startups. For example, having digital innovation hubs, helping them, and also creating regulatory sandboxes that we know are very important for small, medium enterprises. Just one last slide about the timing to tell you that we will come forward with a proposal at the beginning of next year. It will be a regulatory proposal in the sense of a regulatory framework, but it will also be a revised coordinated plan on artificial intelligence with member states. It may seem not a very important aspect, the coordinated plan, but it is going to be very important because of the recovery fund. We have a new recovery fund that has been distributed to the member states. And we, in the Commission proposal, we insist that 20% of that is spent on digital. And some of that will have to be spent on artificial intelligence and some of the actions that we will identify together with the member states on artificial intelligence. So I want to highlight this new angle, which was not there before and which is very important indeed for the future. If you are interested in these topics, we have a large conference on the 9th of October, the AI Alliance Assembly. We do this yearly, and it's online this year, so you can register at the address below. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy. That was quite comprehensive and I hope clear for everyone. With this, you will stay with us because we are going to now open up a little bit of discussion with a panel where we have invited different speakers who come from different backgrounds, and it's good that each of them can really bring. You can leave your camera on, Lucy. It's good that everyone can bring a different perspective. We have, in particular, a member of the European Parliament, Miapetra Kumpula-Natri. We have 2 quite innovative SMEs in different aspects of AI. So I have first Gemma, Galdon, Clavell, and then Alexandre Zapolsky, also from an SME. And then I have one of our experts of the association, who's George Sharkov, who's also been a member of the high-level expert group of the Commission on Artificial Intelligence. So I'd like to ask all the panelists to switch on their mics and their cameras. So with their participation, we can have a perhaps a dialogue, a good debate among us. To start with, perhaps since we have heard from the European Commission, Lucy, perhaps we could hear also from the European Parliament. Miapetra, Kumpula-Natri. So Miapetra, if you are ready, maybe you could give your own reaction to what has been said and how you think the Parliament and yourself can contribute to these proposals the Commission is putting forward.
Thank you, and good Monday morning from Brussels. I'm very happy to be here second time after March from Finland. But I must say that most of the time I work in my cabin, in my office, because everything is digital nowadays in Parliament, everything.
Yes.
So I come here and I work from my laptop. So that is doesn't make a big difference. So Parliament is maybe one of the most modern parliaments at the moment. And it was very rapid digital evolution. But then what you ask from the politician to say, normally when I talk to the SMEs, it is do not regulate. We don't want more regulation, unregulate. But then when I organized a seminar on the data strategy that I wish to be rapporteur, and I'm ITRE rapporteur on that one, and I talked to SMEs also, the question was, please help us with our rights if we share our data and use AI. So I think we have to keep on contact with the politicians as well on this big picture. But then as my speaking time is few minutes, and after Lucilla's great overview, I must comment that I do share the vision. Maybe not all the details did it, but then the activism that European Union has started is important. Of course, politicians and people in general tend to think that AI is something far away, or is it that Europe is only now starting to do something when we notice that China and US are doing a lot, which somewhat is maybe true. And then looking at the investments, we are still lagging behind. But I like to always remind also that the Center for Data Innovation organization table, where they said that US is leading in talent and research and development, and China is leading in adoption and data. So what is then the European Union? Doesn't lead anywhere. Yes, that is the right title. But then you say that Europe is leading China in talent and research and development, and the European Union is leading United States in adoption and data. So the second place in all these aspects is not very bad. It's good and motivating to get started. So we need a framework, what is right. It is not legislated at all, but it is not also too detailed. And then my message has been an understanding so far is that AI is like research. AI is like knowledge. AI is like a technology. So it cannot be too broadened that everything we dictate by one law, say that now we legislate AI, because it is like legislating some statistics or legislating electricity as such. So yes, it must be robust. It framework. It must be easy to understand. There must be sectoral specific observation, I think, most of the time. So this legal framework and rules is very good also to guarantee that the companies can trust and invest and make research, and then the steps to the innovation. The second point important is that we do have the infrastructure. This is the angle where I come from. The last mandate, I was doing the telco legislation first, the roaming and the Data Act. And then all the time there, my line was that we need faster connections that was proposed. It was very difficult to say that, yes, sorry, the copper lines are not nice. And I don't know how many were happy home these few months of the lockdown with a copper connection compared to those who had the fiber and 4G. And this is a very concrete example. You are better off, you are more resilient company, you are more resilient home, you're more resilient home or school if you are well connected. Even this spring that showed to us. So infrastructure and the modern infrastructure is my way all the time. Very high capacity network. I never accepted in when I was doing legislation that could be done by copper. It needs to be better. If you then put your own money and own risk to invest something old-fashioned, then let's do it. But then EU should not support that one. And then for the third one, I see the expertise. We talk a lot in the parliament about the skills, but I would like to add there the software engineering, the developers. And so not only the very high talent and very grassroots skills that I can put the knots, but we need developers. And there I see that Europe lacks the strategy. And we have the big companies educating. And I sometimes ask the global workers that it's nice they come and you know, sponsor that whole city is educated. You can, you know, do Microsoft course or you can do the Google course. It is good added value, but then, so I talked to some SMEs that started from the beginning, the whole strategy that they will develop something on the health sector, and now they are exporting that one because that is so tight for their expertise. So I also wanted to add this kind of thinking that we'll need the quality, skilled people, educated people on all the levels. Very much on the one starting to watch TV, have to understand what it is that blood. It's earlier it was maybe ketchup, now it's the digital change of the photo. So similar understanding what is the AI needs to be for every single person, that you should at least think that who coded this one, why did the algorithm is working this way. So basic understanding for everyone, but then skills on the different level. So in the parliament, I think I will conclude here that there will be a lot of talks about the ethics and then the regulation. And then last week we had the first meeting of the AI special committee, and I'm happy to be nominated as the first vice chair for that one. And we do have a lot very good expertise in that group when I looked around. Different committees, different countries, different parties, different interests. And I must say that maybe my first surprise was that there was a lot of people from AFET as well. So this is my own thinking, but I think earlier it was important as if you were a Minister of Foreign Affairs, so the linking to oil was somewhere very important. And now I see AI is becoming something similar, that you need to know some principles to secure your continent and country. My angle for the international part comes from the INTA committee, the International Trade Committee, that I'm there the standing rapporteur for the WTO or the negotiation among 86 countries of the WTO for the e-commerce. So yes, we are looking also some kind of international rules that could fit also the SMEs and European actors. I will conclude here now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think it was very, very nice to hear that. Based on what I heard from both Lucy and Miapetra, what is important for our association, the European Digital SME Alliance, is indeed put forward the role of SMEs. In particular, Miapetra, you mentioned that indeed you'd like companies not just to use software developed abroad, but also to develop their own software. And for this, we are very happy to have a couple of great speakers in this panel. And I'd like maybe to start with Alexandre Zapolsky, because he is from a European company, a French SME that not only develops software of their own, but they also develop AI applications. And I'm quite sure that Alexandre has, as a company, they have a big stake in this conversation. Lucy mentioned that 41% or so of the respondents were SMEs, but they are not sure. They were all European. Well, here we have one. France is in Europe, luckily, and his company Linagora is quite advanced, as I said, and so maybe Alexandre can tell us a little bit about his company and what your stake is in this conversation. Alexandre.
Yes, do you see me correctly?
No, we can't, but we can hear you well, and I think we shouldn't try too much because we have been trying with your camera for a while, but we couldn't solve it.
It's a problem of North and Standards. It doesn't work correctly with Linux, but it's okay. I'm going to share my view through the radio. So thank you first for having organized this event, Sebastiano, and the European Digital SME Alliance is very important to promote SMEs in Europe and to make this bridge between European SMEs and European Parliament, European Commission, and thank you for that. As you mentioned, Linagora is one of the main and oldest open source company in Europe. So I founded this company 20 years ago, and we not only does open source software, we also develop our own AI solutions, especially in voice technology. We have our own open source voice assistant called Linto, and everything related on what we do on AI is of course open source. So we share publicly our algorithms, and it's one of the, I think, of the key points if you want to develop trust on AI. And I think you should have also a view about this condition of having algorithm open, because that's the best way to understand how the algorithms are coded. And it's also a way to check and to verify that there is no bias with these algorithms. I strongly believe on the fair digital way. There is no fatality between the US giant and the Chinese giants. There is an alternative digital way based on digital technologies, more sustainable, more inclusive, and more ethical. And I really do think that it's the main difference that we can bring to the market with our European technology. So I'm very glad that European Commission and has understood, of course, that and promote that today. So I totally support this idea of having a label, because we don't need only to do tech for good, which is a good goals and something important. But I'm a strong promoter of the good tech for good. And technology is not, all the technologies are not equal. And the European member, Madame Kumpula-Natri, said something important. We don't need with our AI plan in Europe only to promote technologies from abroad, and as we have done since 30 years in IT in Europe, but we need to be more clever, more smart at that time, and we should find a way to support our own SMEs, our own companies able to develop their own technologies and to take advantage of this, not only recovery fund. Of course, there is this recovery fund, and it's a big step in terms of investment for the next years. But all the funds that exist in Europe, so we need to take advantage of that to create a strong industry in technology. And it's not only possible, but it's totally needed. And I'm really committed to that, and I'm very glad to. I can give more details about my ideas about the way we could do that all together.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexandre. It was very, I think for me that was very clear and a very important message. Let me go on with another SME which has a slightly different angle. Gemma, Galdon, Clavell, because you are the CEO of Eticas Consulting, which is a company that focuses pretty much on advising other companies on AI, the ethical aspects, which we heard from the commissioner really at the center. This issue of trust is quite important. And you yourself, you told me you think you can help set up your own, the standard for ethical AI. So your view is perhaps quite interesting, especially because of the subject of this event today.
Thank you so much, Sebastiano. Thanks for the invitation again. Thanks for the efforts of the SME European Alliance on AI, and thanks also to the Commission for the efforts to try to frame what AI is and what it should be doing for EU and abroad. As you were saying, at Eticas, we are probably an unusual SME because we're not asking for less regulation. we require more regulation when new technologies come to market and when new technologies are impacting on people in very meaningful ways. AI is not only what guides you on Google Maps or Apple Maps, it's also what defines in many countries whether you get unemployment, what kind of job is offered to you by your country, whether you are provided with protection if you're a woman at risk of domestic violence. We are seeing algorithms used more and more in very sensitive environments. And so the need to make sure that we develop good technology in those environments, I think it's more important than ever. So we are an SME that has been helped or aided by the passing of the General Data Protection Regulation, because what we do is audit algorithms. So we work with companies to see how to improve their algorithms to ensure that we protect people in technological processes, and that we identify where those algorithms may be having not only bias, which is one of the things that a lot of people talk about, but also inefficiencies. One of the things that we are seeing in all of our contracts, and we work all over the world, is that the quality of the algorithms that are currently being developed and used in the public and private sector is very low. We have really bad algorithms. And I think that Alexandre was also talking about that, not only tech for good, but good tech for good. We don't currently have good tech, and especially not for social services and not for social impact. And that's before, I think that all over the world, we have an innovation drive that very much mimics the idea of Silicon Valley of move fast and break things. And I think that we've realized that this move fast and break things means that you're breaking not only fundamental rights, but also the ability to tailor technology to the actual needs of your client. We don't have good quality supply. We don't have good algorithms in the market right now. So what we do is we work with the clients who have bought an algorithm to see how can we improve it, how can we detect the things that may go wrong once the algorithm is put in place. And so when Sebastiano was saying that we want to develop standards, it's because what we see is that no one else is doing this. There's not a lot of organizations out there that are auditing algorithms and doing practical ethics and finding what is happening on the ground, what is happening when a public administration develops or implements an algorithm, when a private company decides to develop an app for wellness, or a fintech decides to relay with their customers through digital means. So there's a need to understand how to protect people in those processes and how to improve those technical systems. And how do we do that? And our interest in helping the regulators and the standardization bodies is because that practical experience sometimes shows you that some of the approaches of these high-level discussion groups don't really fit what we find in our day-to-day work. And I think it's relevant for this interaction to exist between the people who are doing the thinking and us who are doing the practice, precisely to share how can we get the most of both approaches. Just to give you some examples, it was mentioned before that one of the things that the Commission is considering is an ex-ante conformity assessment for high-risk AI. Well, we had last week the discussion on the potentially racist AI system at Twitter. There were a lot of people showing concern that the way that Twitter chooses what images you see is racist, because it tends to privilege white faces. And the team at Twitter said, we did an ex-ante assessment. We tested for bias at the beginning, but when machine learning is involved, of course, once you release the algorithm will keep on learning some of the dynamics of society, and some of those dynamics are not nice, like the privileging of white faces. So doing only an ex-ante exercise is not enough if you're talking about AI. These are some of the things that we're saying. That's why our audit process at the beginning, but it's a continuous exercise of relationship with the client. Another thing we see, for instance, with this idea of the human oversight, it sounds great, and I guess that when it's being proposed, it feels like the human will always have the best common sense and will intervene in ways that improve the algorithm. What we're finding is that that's not always the case. Sometimes in this human-machine interaction of human oversight, we're getting together the worst of machine bias with the worst of human bias, unless we do it well. Of course, there's ways of doing human oversight well, but someone needs to define what human oversight is and how it should be done, because otherwise we're just leaving companies with no guidance whatsoever on what to do. Sometimes giving companies just very general pieces of advice is not really contributing to helping them do good things, and they become they keep pushing regulation away, but I think it's because they don't understand it. In our experience, we have clients who've come to us saying we hate regulation, and then once we explain it and we say what it means, and that actually regulation is not stopping you from doing anything, it's just asking you to do it differently. And that's our role. We try to never say no. Yes, you can do what you want with data. It's just that if you're dealing with personal data and with sensitive impacts, you'll have to do it differently. You'll have to justify your choices. You'll have to be careful because you're managing something that is very valuable and very sensitive. And I don't think that's the message that's often coming out of regulation. And I think that we need to push for that positive idea of regulation to be out there. But I think that would require that regulation also becomes more focused and more specific, and that's why standards are really important. Other principles that we find to not be helpful is, for instance, the idea of data minimization. We find that if algorithms don't collect some data, then we cannot test for bias. So we have created a way to have access to data without that data being used to make decisions on a human being. But again, this idea that you should not collect the data that you don't need, it's not always conducive to better algorithms. I could say the same about the focus on technical. In our experience, many of the issues related to bias and efficiency and low quality algorithms are not so much technical, but are things that you can address at the very beginning when you are turning complex social problem into an algorithm. And it's there when you can make a really good contribution and make sure that what you're designing is what society needs. So I guess that my point is that I think we need more collaboration between the organizations that are using the platform that Europe has given us with GDPR to forward the space of practical ethics and facilitate spaces where we can talk to standardization bodies and contribute our expertise and our experience in doing this practical ethics and practical incorporation of human rights concerns into the technology. And that's happened forever. Like, we have been regulating innovation forever. Cars don't need speed limits. Cars don't need seatbelts. I always use the same example. We limit technology all the time because the only way to make the most of technology is by ensuring that we minimize its negative impact and we maximize its positive impact. And in the same way that the seatbelt was not put forward by a standardization body, it was the industry that suggested the 3-point seatbelt that we currently use, and that was turned into a standard later on. I think that's one of the dynamics that we need in standardization. Standardization bodies need to be listening to what's happening in terms of innovation in the actual economy and incorporate the good contributions of the productive sector into their discussions on how to regulate AI.
Thank you, Gemma. I think you're also helping us to shift a little bit also the focus towards this big question mark, which is standardization, because indeed, you have on one hand, this let me call it political discussions, regulation, etc. on AI. But then sometimes we have the impression that the policymakers tend to say, okay, but then it's not our task anymore. Then it's about the standards, and that then, I mean, there is a little bit of disconnection sometimes between the policy world, policy making, and the standardization world. And I see Lucy doesn't agree with me, perhaps, but we're gonna discuss about that later. Let me because we wanted also to bring in a standardization perspective to this. Let me ask the last speaker, George Sharkov, because George, you are a very knowledgeable expert. You, besides other things, you were also a member of the high-level group of the European Commission on Artificial Intelligence. And you are, a standards expert yourself, being present in several committees. So you can maybe help us, to make a little bit this connection between the two words, policies and standardization. George.
Thank you. Yeah. Good morning. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Go on.
I don't see you a little bit. Well, I'm sorry that I'm in a naval academy now in a cyber exercise. We are cyber attacking ships by AI and something like that. Well,
okay.
So there might be
for real, I hope.
Yeah. Okay. Now you touch exactly the point, actually. How to connect this higher level policy strategies, wish list, let's call it like that, and to the real life. And to connect it, we have to assume that AI systems are technical systems. So in order to run, somehow, they need some standardization, some interoperability, and so on. The point is, you mentioned that I'm a member of this AI high-level expert group. This is a reply, as Lucy said, to the call of the Commission, the strategy, AI strategy, and so on, but also the further developments like white paper. Let's not repeat that. And the pillars for these ethical guidelines, and I will start from there and I switch to standards, are three. And this is like AI should be lawful, these ethical guidelines, lawful, ethically adherent, and technically robust. So apparently standards mainly touch the technically robustness, but since in legal part, legal normative basis, there is a lot of policy and strategy, regulations, and ethical are semi-moral, semi-society regulated principles following others. However, of course, technical robustness should meet this somehow, but technical people normally do not consider the philosophy of it. I mean, they consider the systems. So the general point so far is like in any ICT, but also in technology, the industrial standards, they are developed bottom up. They come from the industry, from the market, from the need to synchronize, interoperate, and so on. And then after that, some of them, since they are not covered by normative base, legal base, they will need to change, or they trigger some new norms. And also they change the philosophy of the ethics of the society itself. So we have to live with this, the new technologies. So, examples were given by my colleagues so far, how we got used to the things that we never thought before. The point is that what is the difference with AI? That first, since ICT in general revolution is rapidly evolving, but also the new technologies, new so-called disrupting technologies, is not only about AI, which is not the newest technology. It's old technology, but now there is a boost because of many other things, including computational power, but not only. And but we have quantum computing coming, we have big data, and so on and so on. So the point is, when we go to the standards coming bottom up, first they come from practice, from the need that the systems, the market, people should, businesses should interoperate through this digital media, AI enabled in this case. And the main point is that AI is considered, there are two specific points that AI is considered like, at least at this stage where machine learning techniques are the dominant techniques that are in practice, is considered like the black box. And this has been addressed by the president of the Commission, von der Leyen, even in her first speech. I think Lucy mentioned that already, that these new disrupting technologies, we have to make sure that these algorithms, they put first people in the center, but algorithms are not a black box, and also they should be clear rules if something goes wrong. This is very shortly say about the requirements of the systems, and also the Commission will propose a law to this effect next year. So the law is the regulation. This is the highest level normative base, but the law should step on something, and something doable, something feasible, and the feasible part or the practical part is usually called standards. Now, what could be standardized among these aspects of the technical robust AI, and what are the specifics, especially for SMEs there? So we have among these 7 areas from ethics guidelines, we have technical robustness and safety, where we have the stuff, the requirements that are resilience to attacks and security, the security area, and this is what we normally name cyber for AI. So AI are ICT systems, but they are special ICT systems because the type of attacks and the threat landscape that has been developed also with the current ENISA AI work group on securing AI, plus the standards committee, which Alex from ETSI will present securing AI. I'm a member of both, but I will not disclose the work. Alex will talk more about the particular standards, but especially this cyber resilience or resilience of AI against attacks. It's a specific feature for AI system that is on the top of classical ICT systems or software systems that we are using. And here is the first difficulty. We had this difficulty with the market, the companies, small business especially, for more than 30 years to introduce the cyber hygiene, cyber essentials, and that part in the culture, and they don't have it yet. So how this could happen with the AI, where the SMEs are going to use mainly AI as a service, that will be provided to them. So they will need to know, and the standards are here to help, they will need to know what to look for, what these systems, the AI as a service, the engines, plus we have to consider another thing, that AI systems will need to share data, first training data to train the systems, but also at a certain moment, they will need to share eventually knowledge. So the knowledge graphs and the knowledge could be shared, integrated, and you blindly trust this knowledge, which has been incorporated by any other learning machine learning algorithm that has been used. So this type of requirements are not easy to standardize, but at least to list them. So the same thing like cyber hygiene, and that's the direction to go there. Then we have also general safety, fallback plans, and so on. This is another standardized area, which in a technical systems is straightforward because they are like listed numbers of things that can go wrong. In AI, it's a little bit different. And this we call here about the red button and so on and so on. Then another type of requirement is related to accuracy, explainability as well. So explainability is a major issue, especially with the machine learning techniques, and small companies, especially for SMEs, where they are not, they really use AI mainly as a black box. They trust it, but they still need to know why certain decision is taken, why why certain proposal is given, and why what is the confidence in that, what is the level of trust, and so on and so on. So these are specific types of requirements for standardization as well, because we should understand the same things. So high confidence, low confidence, and so on. And last but not least, as it was mentioned, that in a white paper, but not only in the when we go to assessing risks, the risk should be dependent on a not like general. First, it was considered more like sectoral, but I think, and we all know that similar to other systems, usually we call like mission critical systems and so on. So you have dependability, the level of dependability of the system, of the business or the service that you are providing, like that you are monitoring, and the process that you are monitoring. This risk-based approach is important to list the type of risk based on the threat landscape, but vulnerabilities that could happen in let's say good details or structured way. And this has been done by many standardization bodies so far. This is where you start from ETSI committee, from ISO, IEC, where there are like 13 or 15 working groups on different aspects of AI standardization. And we have to consider also that the typical use of AI is not going to be by technical people, but this will be by different sectors. So we have it already in agriculture, in health, and many other places, AI, so-called smart elements, smart sensors, and so on, but smart monitoring systems that go around. And standardization in these fields is a matter of different committees, different standard bodies. So similar to cyber, this will need to go horizontal and specifically vertical for AI. And I am afraid that SMEs will be lost the same way like standardization bodies, because they spread the work over all these areas that I mentioned, and some more that I didn't mention. But the SMEs will be lost, because again we will have the stuff like many standards, some of them certifiable. I doubt what could be certified. You know that we have these cybersecurity certification schemes that is progressing, stuff which is regularly, it's quite structured, I would say. While for AI, we are still in the wish list, or we are in the principles list. At least we can mention requirements, but what could be certified, I doubt. I mean, the way we go in standardization and certification, we are quite far from SMEs adopting that, being aware of that, and even considering applicable to SMEs. So with this, I ring the bell that this type of, let's say, standardization in the field, like trustworthy, technically robust, explainable, and so on, AI, that should go with, let's say, with the mind that SMEs or low awareness business people and even technical people are going to use them. And
George, I think, thank you. I think there's one important element that I captured from what you said, which is really what is going to be applicable in SMEs at the end of the day. Because if we go back to what has happened with the GDPR, the data protection regulation, we have a piece of legislation which is in principle fantastic because it applies to all and it has super good principles. It's the first worldwide, etc. But although it's very good in principle, it's very difficult to apply because it requires companies to do a kind of risk assessment. And it's not, for an SME, it's not a very simple exercise to do. Of course, we have plenty of experts out there that will offer advice to all companies. But for the large majority of small businesses, they would rather want to have a clear list of instructions and clear rules, what to do and what not to do. And also, the other issue is, are we sure that that kind of horizontal approach, which applies to all in principle the same way, is the right tool to solve an issue with the privacy that is perhaps most compelling when we talk about, very big companies, social media, and so on. So are we sure we want to apply the same principle to all? And indeed, Lucy mentioned the fact that the approach with AI, and that's a good thing, I believe, is on high-risk applications. So it's not going to be a regulation, whatever, for everyone, but it is going to distinguish between high risk and not high risk. And let me, before we open the panel for a conversation, let me say something to all the people who are in the webinar and in the streaming sessions. Everyone can use the question function or the chat if they want to have the floor. We can give the floor to the audience and have a discussion with anyone who's interested. Those who are following us through social media, meaning through YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, they can use the comment function in there if they want to ask a question, and as much as possible we will try to reply. I will maybe start with a question to Lucy from the European Commission, because you mentioned, Lucy, when you started talking about standardization, you mentioned three different things. One was the voluntary labeling for AI applications or for AI companies. Then you mentioned the self-certification scheme. And then you mentioned third-party conformity assessment. Of course, I think you understand that these are three very different things. Each of them perhaps solves particular issues, but each of them has a different level of complexity and cost for an SME. a self-certification scheme is not a third-party assessment. A third-party assessment means you need to pay a certification body to come check what you're doing and then provide the right conformity assessment. So what is your take in there? Because we need to find always the right balance. We believe between doing something which is effective, but also not creating an excessive burden to SMEs. So how do you think we're going to go from now, from this list of principles, into something that is applicable to real companies? I know it's not an easy question, but I'm pretty sure you have thought about it. You're muted, I'm afraid.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah, I have to say that I am, in my presentation, sticking to the white paper, so I am not anticipating what we will be proposing in the future. But so if you think in the context of a white paper, of course, you have different options, and these options have different costs attached to them. Now, you can think that, for example, before we were talking about standardization, and we are talking a lot with the standardization authorities, and we've been doing that. We've been doing a workshop on standardization recently, and we will address this in our Alliance conference as well, because we do see harmonize the European standards, for example, a way also for helping small medium enterprises to reduce the cost of any kind of assessment you may need. So that is a very important element. And we count very much on working with standards to bring forward our proposal. So I would like this to be very clear. I know it's not maybe written very clearly in the white paper, but I can tell you that this is the way that we are thinking, that we really need to have standards to pin down what do we mean when we talk about a quality training data set. How do you describe a data set? You're going to need to have a standard for that, for example. And the same goes for robustness and accuracy. Now, when we talk about conformity assessment, again, there can be different levels. For example, there could be different levels on the basis of the risk that you want to address, like you have nowadays in CE marking. It's nothing new, it's nothing different. And it is quite surprising to see that, for example, in our most advanced directives, like, for example, or regulations like the one on medical devices, we're now taking into account software, but in our certification systems, we are not looking at AI, for example. We are really looking at software per se. And so does that, we're not thinking of introducing new certification systems or new completely new procedures, but what we would like to do is to be able to use in those sectors, for example, which could be considered risky. For example, the medical devices, because it's obvious why medical devices enabled by AI can be risky. There are already procedures in place, and what we would like to do is to make sure that those procedures also take into account artificial intelligence risks. So I think that we don't, really want to introduce the new things, the new assessments that can be introduced in this context are more in relation to the fundamental rights, for example. But when you talk about AI embedded in products, and there are already procedures in place because we do have a products regulation, then the idea is to reduce the cost by simply modifying where necessary the procedures already in place, but without introducing necessarily new bodies and new organizations. Of course, when it comes to the assessment of fundamental rights, there we are in a new field. And there you could think of using impact risk assessment, similar to the data protection regulation. You say yourself, well, maybe that's a bit kind of costly for small, medium enterprises. I don't know if it's as difficult as it is described, but anyway, I saw, for example, the some people in the parliament, for example, are thinking of another legislative solution, which would be to include a specific list of risky applications. They could give complete certainty to companies about what are the applications to be considered risky, and one could even think of having some kind of update of such a list. So there are solutions that can be found to reduce the burden on companies and in particular on small medium enterprises. And earlier we mentioned the digital innovation hubs, the testing experimentation facilities. Also, those are organizations that could very much help in reducing the cost of small medium enterprises that are developing risky artificial intelligence systems. Let me highlight the risky part again, because we are not thinking of kind of having to legislate all possible AI applications.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Finally, we also have Alexandre on camera, so we can see you. It's good to have you there. If anyone wants to react to what Lucy said, feel free. I mean, Miapetra, see have you raised your hand?
Yes, very short, because I cannot speak in behalf of the parliament yet, as we do not have ready papers. There will be many. I counted 7 different INIs on the AI. Now we have a special committee, and of course the Commission February papers on AI, but the one on data that I'm working on, actually you can find it in internet already, even it's still unofficial, because we're still fighting on the power in between the committees, whether it will be ITRE-led, as my report is there, or other committees challenging it. So this is not very good examples how parliament sometimes work. It takes a half a year to fight, because then it's the later we wait for the legislation, who will be then the committee to work. But then on the list of risks, or is it the risk that you require with this high level risk? I really do personally think quite difficult exercise, because of course the health is risky business. But is everything on the health that how the X-rays is analyzed, or is it only when it comes to the personal data kind of usage, and then the very industry data is different? In my report, it is very much on the data mobility, how the data is so you need source for AI, and it is called data. And then we have a lot of unused data, but then that comes really close to the SMEs also, that why SMEs do not share more data, why only 17% of the SMEs for the old figure is using the opportunities. And when I talk to the big companies, they always say, there's lack of knowledge and they don't know. I think that is only one part. The other part is that you know that you don't have that much rights to say when you negotiate. So it is like this voluntary scheming only for sharing data is something that I think we should look sector by sector. We wouldn't get automatic driving ever if we only say that you voluntarily share your data. So that's why in my report I also state that we need sometimes specific regulation, not only voluntary sharing data. And then also SMEs get afraid when I say that yes, also business to government. But for me, it's not taboo to also talk about the payback. Once you have a system, you have invented, you have put efforts, you put workforce. It's not also that then the public can have it for free. But then also there is some kind of compensations, like other parts. We need doctors, we need nurses, we need AI solutions, we need specialty knowledge on the technology. So that could be also that, yes, it needs to be shared, but it also can be compensated. So then the third comment on these, what are the tools, labeling, certification, and conformity. I also like the idea that has been put on board, that how improve the coding or algorithm building. So kind of logbook that who and how and on what knowledge they had to do the AI development. Because it is somebody typing, somebody coding, some teams working on that. So then also if you can maybe include that in the labeling, that this has been done by the persons that took the course on ethical AI, that are like the electricity man, that you know that they have to have certain knowledge. So then they're in this knowledge book by those who are in charge of doing the algorithms and preparing them. So the kind of open, transparent logbook could also be the one. So you don't go only into the technical code, but then the circumstances or the company, and then the behavior of the people, or kind of the knowledge level could be also taking on board on that part. The last comment was on the Alexandre also, that yes, I'm one working for a lot for the European ecosystems to come, but then I bring here the challenge of the international data flows. And I do think that the strategy should not be having the European sovereignty or European ecosystems, that we will be another country in the world or the entity in the world who wants to make isolated solutions. No, I'm not working for the unenforced data localization or forbidden open interactions with the globe. So that is the challenge then. But then I will boost for the knowledge and possibilities. So this sensitive part also is important.
I see that Alexandre wants to respond to that. I think it's a quite hot topic, especially with the privacy shield. Perhaps, Alexandre, you need to activate the audio, I think. Right. Yes.
Okay, that's the organizer that mute the mic. Yes, just maybe to be clear on that point. So I strongly believe that the third digital way will not be only done by European countries, and that's something that we need to handle and we need to lead, but we need to do that on some other countries that they share our values and our ideas that technology must serve people and not the contrary. On that aspect, basically, I think almost all the countries in the world, except US and China, can join this idea of the third digital way. The third digital way is not only European digital way, just to be clear. So some word about maybe also, because that's very important to find a way to make regulation for high risk use of AI and so on. And it's totally, I think it's a good question to think about. But at the end of the day, I think that we should work more on the leverage effect that we need to develop to develop our digital industry. And there is a very big challenges on that. I know that the European Commission does a lot, and there is a strong political will on that, and thanks to all the commissioner, but we have especially this Thierry Breton, the new commissioner, especially in charge of digital aspect, that is really pushing a lot, and he really want to develop this idea of being yes, to develop the digital European sovereignty and to do more for having companies that develop from Europe, because the main issue that we have to address for the next 20, 50 years is to understand how we will be able to develop the technologies, the algorithm, the code, because AI, it's only, George said it, AI is technology, AI is code, and of course we need to think about the use, we need to organize the use and all these things. It's perfectly correct, but if we don't have our own industry, so we will just be users of technologies developed on the other countries, and especially in China and in the US. And these people, they don't implement, they don't code, they don't develop the algorithms that they fit with our value. And that's the main problem. And so it's absolutely essential that some companies such as Linagora, but of course we are not the only one, so we are one of the large SME because we are 200 people, but we need to have 1,000 of Linagora inside Europe, able to develop this new generation of algorithms. And how we can do that? So I think we need to do more in terms of R&D. R&D, financement of R&D is still too much complex in Europe. We do a lot. I have 80 people directly involved in R&D inside my company, and we do a lot of European, call for having funds from Europe and so on. But we need to do more, and we need to make things more simple. In France, we have created something amazing called BPI, Banque Publique d'Investissement, and we need to have the same kind of body at the scale of Europe. We need to have the European Bank to invest in R&D with SMEs, and I just share that with you very quickly, but if you want to discuss more, I would be happy to discuss more with you. Secondly, SMEs, they need contracts. And I would like to thank our parliament member here, because the European Parliament has decided, so not the political body, but the administrative body of the European Parliament has decided to invest more in digital sovereignty, and we are a good example of that. So they just chosen one of our solutions called LinkShare. It's the same as Drive from Google, for example, but it's only based in open source, and it's of course it respects by design privacy, and we share all our code, and it's true ethical digital, and that's why they have chosen that. I'm very proud that the European Parliament has made this choice, and it's directly a strategic choice to choose this kind of technology and not to go with US go-to-meeting webinar solutions, for example. and so we need to lead by example. And European Commission, it's a big organization, 60,000 people. European Parliament as well is a big organization, and please lead by example, because it's super great to do super good policy, but the best is to act by example. And so when the European Parliament choose our solution or choose a solution from one other European company, you show that it's possible to believe in your own SMEs. And you need to be proud of that, you need to promote that, and you need to convince all your colleagues to do the same, not only at the European scale, but also in all national organizations. That's crazy. All our governments, they still use massively international solutions, and they have always a good reason to do that. And especially on health, for example, in France, there is a big mess around that, and it's just unacceptable, and there is no logical on that. It's just the place of the lobby and the strength of their sales force to be able to convince government to use this kind of technology. So we need to be more promoter of our own technology. And for that, let's be inspired by this wonderful country called Russia. I know that we have some different point of view about political issue on that, but go far away from political issue with Russia. Have a look on what they have done on digital area. They have, because of the sanction, they didn't have the choice. So they had to develop their own ecosystem of digital companies. And they did it. And they have a special list of only Russian products, and the government can use only product from this list. And it's a big help for all Russian companies to sell directly to the government. Why we don't do that at the European scale, and especially on the new topics such as AI? our algorithms are not the same than the algorithms of the big giant internet player. And believe me, we are at the same level of quality in terms of algorithm. Last point, I would like just to share that with you. We all look after the big data sets for AI. But there is an alternative to that. We don't need to get only big data sets. We can also invent new algorithms able to do the same with less data. We need to be more frugal on AI. And because of our open source choice on the voice technologies, we don't have the choice. And so we had to invent new way to be able to do speech recognition, but without to use the same data set as Google, for example. And we have proven by R&D European project that we were able to do the same as Google. We have better results as Google in terms of speech recognition with our Linto technology. So that's possible. You need to develop new algorithms. And so, of course, we should try to get more data sets, but in the same time, we should invest more on new age of AI technologies, AI algorithms, to invest in innovative companies to able to invent this kind of new AI more frugal.
Okay, Alexander, let me just react on one thing you said regarding Russia, because I think many people were looking very surprised. But indeed, I agree with you that Russia has, a strong national sovereignty in digital sector. There is something which my organization has been doing with many others in Europe, which is to work on a labeling system for cybersecurity. Okay, you know that cybersecurity depends a lot on public procurement, so on governments and national authorities buying solutions from companies. And we have developed a label which is called Cybersecurity Made in the EU, based, by the way, on the example of France and Germany, which already have similar labels, whereby the national French procurers tend to buy only French products and the Germans buy only German products. And we have developed a European one, such that we can create ideally a European market for our own companies. And I believe, this is just the beginning, but we should be doing that for software made in Europe, for AI made in Europe, for anything, because it's good information not only for citizens and other companies, but especially also for national governments, for public authorities to understand what are you buying here. But having said that, I also wanted to open the floor a little bit to the audience. There was a question from Malcolm Fisk. So Malcolm, we can give you the floor, and perhaps you can. I can read your question, but you can also speak it out yourself. Let me see if it works. Malcolm, it seems that he's not ready or not working. I can read out Malcolm's question. He's saying that Gemma indicated that moving fast on product development can undermine ability to ensure that fundamental rights are met. Right? She said, "Move fast and break things," like the typical motto from some American companies. So he's asking how within the Commission agenda can we slow down development at a time where there are commercial imperatives that relate to well-being and increasingly... Malcolm?
Hello, yes.
Yes, you can ask your question loud. Thank you.
Okay, I thought I was connected, never mind. Gemma made a very important point earlier on about the fact that AI developments are moving very quickly, but this can potentially jeopardize our ability to consider some of the rights issues that may be compromised because of the speed of those developments. And I wondered how we could find an appropriate balance, if you like, between slowing down to attend to rights, but at the same time grasping the digital agenda that is so important to future commercial objectives within the European Union.
Is that perhaps for Lucy? Or for, let's see if Gemma wants to react first, as she was mentioned.
Yeah, just clarify that it's not a matter of speed. It's about the disregard for the things that you break. In that speed, you can go fast and do things well. And what we're finding is that when you go fast and don't care about the things that you break, then things become even more slower. So when we find a bad algorithm in an organization, we basically have to stop it from being implemented. Oftentimes, algorithms have to be discarded and processes have to start all over again with a huge financial cost for the company, but also reputational risk because of the decisions that the algorithm may have already made. So it's not only about the speed, but also about this disregard for potential consequences. Just to give you an example, in one of the accidents that an autonomous car had in the US, the judge requested the technical specifications of the autonomous car, and it was found that the autonomous cars that Uber uses in the US are not programmed to identify a human being outside of a zebra crossing. That's not only a matter of speed, but it's a matter of just complete disregard for any level of quality or accountability, but also quality. How can you release technology that does not take into account the real world where human beings do cross streets outside of zebra crossings? I think that's an extreme example, but it shows you the kind of things that we are finding. So you can go fast and do it well, but then you will probably need other people in your team. You'll probably need multidisciplinary teams where you don't only have engineers, but also people that understand the complex society that you are trying to intervene upon. So I think it's very much about moving away from that level of lack of responsibility for outcomes and not so much about slowing down progress or innovation.
Yeah, I don't know if Lucy wants to continue, but for me, this is very much an issue also of liability. So who bears the consequences for certain things, which brings me also again to Lucy, because you mentioned earlier this idea of using like the CE mark approach for AI applications or services or products. And that bears, in my opinion, a big kind of issue or contradiction, because we see this happening with any product that embeds software. The issue with product that embeds software is that the product is not the same when you sell it and in the life cycle of the product. Because when you have a software can be constantly improved, can be constantly updated, can be constantly changed by the manufacturer to make it better, or even by third parties. And luckily, we leave it open to third parties, especially SMEs, that can improve software all the time if it is open. But that means that this is a big issue when you think about using the system of the CE marking, because the CE marking is pretty much an ex-ante certification system, a conformity assessment system that says, okay, when you place something on the market, it is safe. But what happens after? Is this the right approach? Because you mentioned the product safety regulation and so on, but we know we have this issue in many other sectors, because more and more products are embedding software, and the system of ex-ante conformity assessment simply is becoming more and more difficult to use. I don't know if you have a take on that. You need to reactivate your mic. Let me just.
Yes, I do. When we think and when we talk about ex-ante conformity assessment, I think this was written in the white paper as well. When we are making this comparison, we are actually thinking to the example that Gemma gave before about the fact that you may need to go back to make a check once in a while for the reasons that you said, because the software gets updated, but also for the reasons that Gemma said, that sometimes artificial intelligence learns by itself and therefore modified. Now, we have observed at the moment, for example, in the high-risk applications, the artificial intelligence tends to be frozen, so it tends not to learn. But probably if there was a checking system over time, then would also give incentives maybe to let the AI continue to learn. As I said, I'm talking about options and ideas that were also introduced in the white paper. So I'm not telling you this is what we will do. But certainly when we talk about, or we refer to ex-ante conformity assessments for AI, we also refer to the possibility of having further checks afterwards. And we also propose as an option a mix, but this is a little bit different. When we talk about the mix of an ex-ante and ex-post monitoring system, here we mean the fact that, you know, even with an ex-ante conformity assessment, even if it was perfect and it was possible to check everything, you would simply really be minimizing the risk that may arise later. You know, there is so much you can really check in an ex-ante assessment. You're minimizing the risk that may arise later. You're not saying there will be no harm, nothing can happen at a later stage. So you may need to complement this with other ex-post, as we call them, monitoring systems, where, you know, some applications could be audited, for example, in terms of the characteristics they have. Again, just to, you know, to strengthen, let's say, preventive measures for this kind of systems.
Okay, thank you. With this, I'm afraid we have to close this panel. So I would like to thank very much all of you, Lucy, Gemma, Miapetra, George, and Alexandre, for being with us in this panel. We could continue for hours, but unfortunately we have an agenda to follow. So we will now break for a 15 minutes coffee. Hopefully you have it in your own offices, and we will start again at 11:05. All of you, it would be very good to have you also later, so you can take part also in the interact with the panelists in the second panel, which is going to be more about standardization, the standardization organizations, etc., to hear really what they are doing, to react a little bit to what you've been saying until now. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Back again with the ICT Forum of SBS, an artificial intelligence policy, norms and standardization, challenges and opportunities for SMEs. We are about to start with the second panel, which follows the first one, which was more about policy, and we go into the second panel, which is quite more directly into standardization. I'm happy that we have a quite good representation of standardization organizations in the second panel. In the meantime, I'd like to ask the speakers for the second panel to activate their camera. They should be more or less all present already. I would say we have a quite good representation of standardization organizations because we have the 3 European standards organizations, CEN-CENELEC, ETSI, and we also have an international organization, IEEE, which should be with us today. So I hope we can have, a quite comprehensive conversation, listening from the different contributions that the different organizations are offering to standardization of AI. The issues we want to talk about are roughly, of course, what happens with standardization of ethical AI. Is something we can standardize? Are there already some standards out there? What about access, data access standards, especially if this can help SMEs better access data, and also about the security of AI, which is indeed an important aspect. So let me. Oh, good to have you on the screen. You can also activate your mics, so you're ready when you have the floor. So we will start with a statement by each of the speakers, 3 to 5 minutes, so we understand which organization they come from and what actually they have been doing in AI. What is their approach in standardization of AI? The first one I would like to start with is Sebastian Hallensleben, sorry if my pronunciation is not 100% correct, who is representing the German Engineering Association, BDE, but is also the convener of the CEN-CENELEC AI focus group, and he participates in standardization developments on AI in various bodies, also doing research. So Sebastian, what is in particular that yourself and CEN-CENELEC have been doing in standardization of AI, and what is the approach at CEN-CENELEC?
You're almost describing the one slide that I've put together.
Good.
Let me just transport that and hope that technology picks the right one of my screens, rather than, well, it's a 33% chance. So we'll see how that goes.
Let's give it a try.
If it doesn't, you've got the one slide, and you might need to have it shown from your end.
I hope we won't see any private information from your screen.
No, we're not in Argentina. There are no risks of that kind. But on the other hand, technology doesn't seem to. Okay, right. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay.
Yes, we see a slide now.
Excellent. Yes. So thank you again for inviting me to this panel. So my name is Sebastian Hallensleben. You actually got quite close with the pronunciation, and yes. Together with a French colleague, Patrick Bezombes, I'm the convener of the CEN-CENELEC AI focus group. I put together a few key points, not spectacular, but just with a goal of giving you a rough idea of what we're actually doing and what role we're playing in the European economic and standardization landscape. So the mission of the AI focus group is really to be a starting point to create the foundations for AI standardization at the European level. And the key questions are, what actually is specific or particularly relevant to Europe, because we've got all those standardization activities at international level, in particular in ISO IEC SE42 and IEEE, which we'll discuss later. So the question is, what is actually specific to Europe? And based on that, how should we address those specific or particularly relevant issues? Is it that we need our own activities at a European level? Is it that we need to collaborate with other organizations? Or is it that we need to make sure that the European perspective gets a voice at an international level? So like most other standardization activities in AI, we've really got two clients, if you like. The first client is the obvious one. It's the standardization community, consisting of course, CEN-CENELEC, our parent, if you like, but also all the standardization stakeholders, including, of course, your audience today, SMEs and also other companies. But the other client, and equally important, has been the European Commission. And we've actually been in a fairly close collaboration with the European Commission to make sure that what we develop in standardization ties in with the regulatory planning and also the requirements that the policymakers have in Brussels and Strasbourg. And then, of course, interfaces to pretty much everyone else who's active in the field of AI standardization. We have been lucky that all those organizations have people who also have been present in the AI focus group, so we didn't even need formal liaisons, but we had a good personal overlap, which made it quite easy to make sure the perspectives are reflected. We've published two papers, one the response to the white paper of the European Commission, and just now our roadmap report, which is sort of going through the formal approval process right now, but the group has done their work. And some of the focus areas that we're looking at is the scope of AI standardization and regulation, which is a nice way of avoiding the word definition or terminology, but we need to figure out what are we actually talking about, and also a high-level vision that we want to have for Europe. Another focus area, how do we safeguard specific European values? How do we handle AI ethics in a way that is both policy friendly and policy compatible, but also doesn't create any unnecessary red tape for industry? How can we group an ethics approach depending on risk classifications? How can we standardize the description of ethical properties of a system, and so on? Another focus area, digital sovereignty. If you talk about AI in Europe, you have to talk about what is actually Europe, which is a fairly interesting and surprisingly complex question. So what we do does touch quite closely on the issues of digital sovereignty. Then the actual standardization needs in a stricter sense. So in particular things like accountability, quality, data for AI, security, safety, AI engineering. Also R&D needs. We identified quite a few areas where a lot of research is needed before you can even start standardizing, and of course the issue of testing and conformity assessment. You can see with the stats on the right-hand side that this has been quite a large focus group, or it has grown quite big, and it is probably, it's under discussion at the moment, going to become a more permanent structure, maybe a European AI JTC, similar to what we have for cybersecurity. And we're also in discussions in various directions to make sure we have a closer collaboration between SDOs, particularly with colleagues here in the call today, so that SDOs start formulating consolidated positions as a basis for policy making as well. So that's just a short overview. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go into more details later when we have a conversation. The next person to continue with is going to be someone representing ETSI, and I'm talking about Alex Leadbeater. Again, correct me if I don't pronounce correctly your name. Alex has also quite a long experience in standardization, and he is actually leading an ETSI specification group, an ETSI ISG, on securing artificial intelligence. So you can yourself and Lindsay Frost later, also from ETSI, but more from a ETSI board perspective, can perhaps elaborate a little bit on what your approach for AI standardization has been until now.
Okay, good morning all. Hopefully you can hear me, and if you can see a train, we're probably in the right direction. So
yes, we can.
Right, okay. In that case, hopefully if PowerPoint's going to play ball, which it should, go on. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always the risk. Exactly which monitor are you sharing to the internet? So yes, thank you. So I actually sit across a number of things in ETSI, all security related, so AI being the latest. So what we'll do quickly is give you a rundown of what ETSI's been doing in the AI cybersecurity space, and obviously we'll then keep the detail for the later panel. So number of kind of staging points, and all this information will be available after, so you can follow all the links and do whatever. So I think the thing that's most interesting with this was a point that was made by the European Commission back in 2019. So of the 200 or so groups in the world that were doing something on AI, only one of them at that stage, the ISG wasn't running, was doing anything remotely security related. And there are now 2 that actually specialize in security. So what is ETSI, ISG, SAI? So one of the things that I think George and others in the earlier panel picked up on this very well, so thank you, George, was security brings AI brings a new set of threats to the landscape. They are different to traditional systems. They are difficult to understand. We have ethics, we have explainability, and all sorts of things thrown in. So what SAI is doing is taking a step back from the use of SAI or the use of AI and the sort of rush to deploy it and the big data usage, and step back and say, well, okay, how do we actually secure the fundamental concepts? So what is it that we want to do with the AI, and how do we secure that? What SAI does not do is get involved in the actual usage of algorithms. So a lot of the conversations earlier again around specific ethics, specific algorithms. SAI explicitly takes a step back from that, and Lindsay will probably talk more about that in a bit, but we're interested in how do you build trustworthy frameworks underneath that then allow you to use AI to do things. So the group has this rather simple, relatively simple model that we've put together of what do you use AI for. Now you'll notice on this there is nothing to do with what a specific AI does. It's all, you're going back to the fundamentals with security. If you want trust, you want ethics, you actually have to have something you can build that on top of. Trust, being a human concept, is something that you essentially achieve. What SAI is doing is trying to understand those building blocks, and you'll see in a minute there are 6 specific pieces of work we're taking forward. But let's for a minute pause on what the threat landscape for AI looks like. So you have attacks on AI itself, which is what people seem to focus on. So poisoning data, algorithms that have either got compromises in, either through poor design or an attacker does something to it. But it's far more complex than that. AI itself, to a degree, is capable of some self-security if the algorithms are well designed. But we have to recognize that they can be used for attack and defense. AIs are not in isolation. AI is slowly creeping into most networks, most parts of society, and most systems, and they are going to interact with each other. So how do you get 2 AIs to securely talk to each other, not just humans, and establish trust? If you connect something to an AI, how does that AI understand that as we sit here and we're all on webcams, how does an AI understand that what it's been given is a webcam? We understand as humans largely by that sort of subtle interaction. So how do we do all that, and how do we trust? So there are 6 specific pieces of work we're undertaking. We'll explore some of these throughout, I guess, the rest of this session. The one I want to focus on actually is the securing AI problem statement. So for the AI community, or for the SME community, really good sort of starter for 10 if you're trying to understand how am I impacted by AI? What are my security risks? What are the things that change? Really, really good start point for people. It's freely available. The others we'll explore as we go, but all of this is on the Etsy website. You will find the link to it, and hopefully Lindsay will now expand, I guess, on the wider stuff that Etsy's doing. So I will pause here before we carry on later.
Okay, Alex, thank you very much for that. I think I'll then hand it over to Lindsay Frost. Lindsay is a member of the Etsy board, and is being very much involved within the board of Etsy on the strategic positioning of Etsy towards AI standardization, has been explaining. Yes, when we can see already your screen, you can perhaps try to enlarge it. Yes.
Yes. I just need to apologize. Just last week at the Etsy board meeting, the Director General, what can I say, reminded Etsy board members that when we speak for Etsy, we should get the documents approved first. But there is a little bit of a short time, so I've put everything onto my company PowerPoint instead. And I'll try to get permission to upload a PDF with the Etsy logo after this event. But everything I'm saying is really related to Etsy activities. So
okay, thanks for the disclaimer. I think we understand that.
Okay, thank you. So briefly, this is me. And in fact, the key part to note is that recently Etsy has set up an OCG, so a coordination group for AI, to keep track of where and what we are doing related to AI, including Alex's remarks about the securing AI ISG. And what I wanted to start with is a brief overview of who's doing what. And unfortunately, the answer is everybody is doing, it seems to me, everybody is doing something on research or standardization. So this is not a up-to-date or not a complete map, but you can see there are a number of different kinds of organizations and a number of different groups in the standards world who are all doing something related to AI. And I could expand this, and of course, each group has got many, many documents. And as we heard just a while back, even 1 or 2 years ago, there were still 200 or more explicitly doing AI. And if you look a little bit more broadly, especially from SME side, you'll find a lot of AI or machine learning relevant, even, let's say, quality control using photo recognition. These things are happening in topics which are typically called smart manufacturing, or maybe tactile internet for control, or digital twins. So it's a very broad area. And there are a lot of alliances doing work. A lot have been funded by the European Commission to really be seeds and growth areas for work within Europe, and involving a lot of SMEs and universities. That's all good, but how do we make sense out of it? Briefly start with the fundamentals, which was just mentioned by Alex, and then go as an SME to your needs. So briefly, there are a bunch of fundamentals. So what are we talking about? The terminology, what use cases, and as SMEs, you each have maybe your own flavor or a family of flavors that you want to cover. Then before going further, there should be a discussion and an analysis of the ethical aspects, the impact of the use case on society. And we've had some remarks in some Etsy groups recently, what for COVID-19 really might be needed is some kind of mandatory checking, because in Germany, 25% of the people who get a notification that they were in contact with someone who is infected only 25% actually go away and get tested themselves. And of course, as soon as you talk about mandatory things, then you're getting way over into the ethics side. So people come up with the ideas, but if they're suitable ideas is very important to check. And then of so on, you can see various topics there. You get more and more complex, more and more mature, and interoperability is absolutely critical. And then testing what you've got, of course, and then KPIs, is it doing what you want, what's expected, and is it continuing to do what's expected? As we heard earlier this morning, AI systems, what can you say, not mutate, but learn or collect ideas from their users, and that can become divergent from the expectation. So for ETSI, I wanted to put across the existence of the white paper brought out in June. And what we try to do in this white paper is give a kind of a map where different groups, including 3GPP, which belongs to the ETSI family, what they're doing, and including, if I just look at my fine print, the ISG for SAI, which is mentioned briefly by Alex. And it's labeled in a vertical way from the simple terminology through down to testing. And there's the link. So what I wanted to note is, depending on your use case, you have maybe to look at ethical requirements in these two groups mainly, or you may want to look at the reliability or the security issues, which Alex just mentioned, or including IoT systems, and you're collecting data, but is it accurate? Is it labeled? Is it able to be checked later? Because bad data in means bad results out always. So I'll take one more minute just to give you my personal take on how to make sense of all of that. And these are taken from the organizers, the main points. So much is going on. Don't try to do it alone. Join and find allies in SBS or in other communities. What standards are missing? Too hard to say, in my opinion, right now. Coordination is what's missing. You have to realize standards people are fanatics. They really focus on specific topics, and trying to get them to look across the other side of the planet or even across to the other side of the building is sometimes quite difficult. And much research is missing, and try and see is often missing, but there I think the Commission has done huge benefit to give people the chance to try out ideas. And before we talk about ethical, we better talk about explainable, because really this has to come first. And one person remarked about access to data, and I give a hint. Sherlock Holmes spent most of his time in the stories collecting good data. And why? Because if you don't check your sources and the accuracy and even the permission to use it and keep using it, then your whole system is, what was the word, poisoned or just dirty. So finally, if there's advice on how to keep going and doing a great job in Europe, I would say do the smaller problems or the tackable problems first, insist on interoperability. It won't be there from day one, but better make it by day 3, and try to converge as you go forward. Okay, that was my brief summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. I think you really touched upon some very, very important points that, I will personally very much agree with the issues you highlight, especially in the last slide. Let me move ahead. We have, I wanted to give the floor to Joachim Lonien. Again, sorry if my pronunciation isn't particularly correct, which I don't see on the screen, but I know he's connected. Can we activate Joachim's camera? Yes, you are there. Joachim is also someone involved in standardization himself, especially in the National Committee, in German Committee in DIN. But he is also an SME, is representing an SME, and he is also a member of the my organization's focus group on AI, the Digital SME Focus Group, together with the European Commission Joint Research Center, where we have more than 40 SMEs that are from all over Europe who are really leading on AI, and he's been selected as one of the members. Next to the speakers who were in the previous panel, Alexandre and Gemma, who are also members of that group. But Joachim himself, as I said, is a member of several standardization initiatives, in particular this DIN National Committee on AI. So Joachim, as an SME and as someone involved in standardization, you can probably tell us what is your take about what needs to be done and what is being done in standardization for AI.
Yeah, hi, happy to do so. Let me check first. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay?
We can all hear you correctly. Yes, and see your slide, by the way.
Okay, perfect, awesome. That's very good. I only put together one slide. I do want to talk about a couple things, but since this session is focusing on standardization, I figured, this is the centerpiece of the topic and what you are probably most interested in. I'm actually not sure how much time I was allotted to.
I would say normally we have been asking up to 5 minutes, but of course, if you want to say something very interesting, then you can take a few more minutes.
No,
but...
no, that's perfect. That is awesome. So yeah, I am representing a very small company in Berlin, Germany. We're called NeuroCat, and we are focusing on testing and improving the quality of AI systems. You've been talking about quality of AI quite a bit in the last hour or so. So this is quite a good match, I believe. NeuroCat was founded in 2017, so we're about 3 years old, and we are indeed really only focusing on assessing and improving the quality of AI systems. That is, we don't create AI, we don't program, we don't write algorithms for cars or drones or anything. We just, what we do is we receive the AI modules that are produced by car manufacturers, by drone manufacturers, by medical supplies, and we look at them, we take them apart, and we point out the weak spots. So if you picture a car on the road, we want to make sure that the car recognizes the stop sign when there's a stop sign, regardless if there is snow or fog or dirt covering it. It doesn't matter, the car's supposed to stop, and that is what we're making sure of. So the reason why we got into standardization is when we started off at the end of 2017, there was almost no talk about AI quality. There was a bit of a craze around AI. Everybody was, starting to use AI or talk about AI or to, deploy it in their devices without actually making sure, do those things actually make sense? Are the decisions comprehensible? Is it transparent? Are the decisions that are being made, are they actually good? Do they do what they're supposed to do? And we thought this is like a perfect opportunity to, get a foot into that market or be the first ones to move into that market. So what we did is we called other companies, and some of the companies that we called, you can find on the slide right here. We called them up and we said, we would like to put together a consortium, an industry and academia consortium that looks at AI quality in general. And then we also wanted to focus on the 3 quality pillars that are robustness, comprehensibility, and performance. And so we had an initial workshop where there were 40 people. It was really remarkable how many people wanted to participate in this initial workshop. And then we decided to put together a consortium and actually sit down every couple of weeks and discuss this topic and put together a technical standard. And then we got together, there were 16, 17 organizations. And so what we wrote down in the STEAM spec is not actually something that was only written by NeuroCat, but we put together the whole group, and we wrote most of the text actually. But it was just very good to see that even larger organizations like Microsoft and EY and Bosch, we were in complete agreement that these are the 3 parameters that should be investigated before you deploy your AI system. So that was very, very good to see, and it basically also helped us, just to point out the benefits of this whole standardization process. This really helped us to create our own business model, because we actually didn't know how to make people aware of the quality of AI and that there might even be quality issues. So by doing this, we got in touch with larger corporations like Volkswagen and Porsche and PricewaterhouseCoopers, and of course they were all deploying their AI modules without knowing, are they actually doing the right thing? And this is how we got our first customers. But the other thing that was very, very important in this process was because AI started to become like a bigger issue in also the government circles, at least, well, the German government, and of course the European Commission, we got connected to some federal agencies of the German federal government, and they are now they're now talking to us about potential pilot projects where we get to test in a controlled environment. We get to test all kinds of AI modules, and then really quantify quality parameters. So there's a federal agency in Germany. It's called Federal Agency for IT Security, I believe, and I'm sure every European country has something similar. It may sound a little different, but it's basically the same thing. Yes. And this agency is basically in charge of making sure that whatever IT components are deployed in the public realm or in public spaces, they have to make sure that it's safe and secure. Safe meaning that there's no functional safety issue, and secure meaning in terms of cybersecurity that the device cannot be hacked and taken awry. So what they want to do is they want to establish a conformity assessment approach or process. So basically they want to make sure there's a certification process around AI. And we're not quite there yet, of course, but they need to run pilot projects in order to do that, and in order to write down how is it supposed to take place. But they also need testing tools, and this is basically what NeuralCat has to offer. We are, at this point in time, we are the only company who has a testing tool that can actually run all these quality tests, and we've created literally more than. This sounds crazy, but so we generated 40 billion stress tests, and so we're trying to cover as many scenarios as humanly possible in order to really stress test an AI system, whether it's on the street or in the air or in a medical device or on an airplane. It doesn't really matter. We're just continuously generating more and more stress tests so that we can test any AI device there is. And this is important because the more scenarios you can create, the higher the chances are that you can actually have a functionally safe and secure device. And I think why I personally think this is very, very important is that I doubt that Europe, or at least I doubt that Germany, for that matter, is going to outrun the US or China in terms of creating AI and deploying it without testing it. I mean, this is just done, every single day, because they just have a very different value system. They have different laws, and